Hi, folks. Thanks for joining us today to look at the city of Vacaville and the update we made to the economic indicators dashboard. My name is Rob Eiler, and I'm working with Chabin Concepts in the city of Vacaville to look at some of the things that are emerging in terms of the economy within Vacaville and the regional economy. We're also monitoring events around Solano County and California as context for where the city may be going. Now, what we're going to start with is the labor market. So as of June 2025, the update for the labor market is through April 2025, and we seasonally adjusted those data. Excuse me. And this is what the dashboard looks like, or where we're at right now in terms of the labor force of folks that live in Vacaville and are either looking for work, have a job, or work for themselves. And the darker blue portion is the chunk of the labor force that is working for themselves or somebody else. So we can see that in 2025, we've actually seen a lift on both. And the space between is the genesis of the unemployment rate for the city of Vacaville. So we've seen that go up a little bit, but not as much as it did late 2024. So that gap has closed a little bit, and it's good to see that growth. Now, if we took the county context, we've seen the county and the amount of hiring that's taking place at local businesses within Solano County, regardless of where people live. For example, if they come from Contra Costa County to work in Benicio or Vallejo, or they come from Yolo County to work in Dixon or in Vacaville, those folks are counted here. These are not the residents of Solano County or of Vacaville only. But you can see, and this is what I want to try to say, is that the context in terms of Solano County being a place for employment and thus thinking about the city of Vacaville and their employers as a place for employment has faded a little bit in 2025. So what the two graphs we just showed you suggest is that the city of Vacaville's residents are becoming more plentiful in those that are available for work or working, but they are likely working some other place than Solano County, at least in the short term, in the sense that the number of people working for a Solano County based employer is going the other direction versus the city of Vacaville residents. Now, if you look at wages and what people are being paid, we saw a slight uptick in 2025. The data for wages are released by California EDD using the Bureau of Labor Statistics wage data and sort of resynthesizing it. And so right now I'm using the Bureau of Labor Statistics data, and you can see the blue columns, which are Solano County. And in essence, the labor market in which Vacaville operates, the blue column has lifted up a little bit. Now, these data are purchasing power adjusted or adjusted for inflation in such a way that 2022 is our base year. And then we're looking to see what happened with wages since then. So you can see in 2023, wages in Solano County fell a little bit, suggesting inflation. We're pushing wages down faster than what you're getting paid on your paycheck is pushing it up at the middle of the distribution or the median. 2024, there were some gains because inflation slowed down, and then there were some gains again in 2025. If you look across the region, very similar phenomena, especially in Sonoma and Marin counties. Those are the next two columns next to the blue column. And so we're watching these to think about, okay, well, where are payments going to workers in such a way that we want to be able to provide both people that work in Vacaville with rising wages, in the sense we want to provide them with a good standard of living, but we also want Solano County's residents, including Vacaville's residents, to also be earning something that allows them to stay in their home and not have the threat of having to leave or make a sort of a broad decision about whether or not they continue renting in Vacaville or have to leave Vacaville overall, or they have to sell their home. So as long as there's really no change in terms of the labor market, there should not be a lot of pressure on housing markets. Now, if you actually look at what's happening in housing markets, we've seen some flatness. So the blue line here is Vacaville, and Vacaville generally is a little higher at its median home price for sale than is the county of Solano or Solano County's housing market overall, which is the sort of amber colored line right below the blue. The lighter colored line at the top is California's median home price since February 2022. So you can see the cycles are very similar, though the state on average has lifted off because a lot of the Central Valley is seeing continuous rising growth. It's been a very wild phenomenon what's been going on between, let's say, Sacramento and Bakersfield in terms of the housing market. But regardless, that is helping lift that median home price up for the state. And that's been great in terms of the state overall sort of maintaining through higher interest rates, through shifting population, a rising home price. For Vacaville and Solano County, the growth that we saw coming out of the pandemic flattened to a certain extent and has come back a little bit since the bottom was hit in April or May 2023. Part of that is that in Solano County, we tend to be a little bit more interest sensitive than, let's say, the state overall. But the bottom line, we're seeing a little bit of a lift. Now, if we look at what's going on in tourism, there was a lot of concerns coming into 2025, especially in March and April, that we'd see a real strong structural contraction of visitors. Well, that happened nationally, but Vacaville's occupancy rate actually kind of continued to climb up and it beat last year's a little bit in April, suggesting that Vacaville might be ready for a pretty decent summer versus the regional comparisons, which is great. We will see if in fact that continues through the summer. But for right now, that increase in April is looking good versus where we were in March. So you can kind of see that effect. February and March, a little bit of a downturn, April picking up. And as long as the weather stays nice, we avoid a fire and sort of the geopolitical concerns around travel stay relatively stable. The current situation in Israel and Iran makes it a little tricky to know whether or not that'll be stable or not, but we're watching that very closely. Now, look at population change in terms of thinking more on the demography of Vacaville. The population data for Vacaville came out that is basically through the end of 2024. So you can see that the population of Vacaville in terms of an index of where we were thinking about in 2021 as the base, we're a little bit above the 2021 population. You can see those two columns, the gray and the yellow, fell a little bit and then picked up. Solano County fell a little bit, picked up a little bit, but not much, and it's still below where we were in 2021, and that's also true for California. So when you sum all that up, when people are moving to Solano County, they seem to be picking Vacaville on average, which is great. It's the reason we think about population growth is it's a suggestion that people see an advantage to their lifestyle or to their work environment by moving to a certain place. And then you can see from the county and the state side where the latest demographic forecast is. You can see Solano County rising relatively quickly from 2025 through 2050 or through 2070 in this graph. I'm sorry. You can see California kind of going on a wild ride, but ultimately also rising over time, though it's peaking in, let's say, the 2050s, where Solano County looks like it's going to grow almost linearly through 2070. That also suggests that in general, Solano County is foreseen as a very good place to live, and Vacaville will be one of those places where people want to move. So when we think about what to watch, tariffs and deportations and sort of the general geopolitical environment in the United States will start to affect Vacaville's small businesses and its residents as prices start to climb up a little bit. How much they'll climb up will very much depend on the current inventory level, the current value of shipments coming in from importers, and what happens in the United States in terms of broadening markets for imported goods and flattening out, if possible, the larger effects of the rising tariff environment. Deportations will have an effect on both taxable sales, general sales volume and travel, as well as available labor force. So watch for all that. And remember, small business will be on the front of that problem before anybody else. Vacaville remains an affordable place to buy. We saw that with the home price graph. Wages, as they've increased, suggest that the labor market remains relatively warm, regardless of, let's say, the last 6 months ups and downs. But we're watching to see whether or not there's a slowdown in the ascension of wages because the labor market is starting to slow down. And we want to make sure we never forget about life sciences as being one of the major places in which Vacaville has a niche, and watching to see how changes in federal policy around research and development dollars in an array of grant funding and how they treat universities may affect how life sciences goes forward. We will see how that goes. And the next time we come back, we'll be checking in on the annual look at life sciences, the full array of industries within Vacaville, and a look forward toward 2030. Thank you so much.